All right. And so ideally, we are now live, which means this is a little bit more pressure than we usually have when we film or record a podcast, right?
Quite right.
All right, yeah. So let's go ahead and start recording. So you all set with your program?
Yep. I actually already hit record. Wasn't sure you were going to give me a cue, so I figured I would go for it.
Oh, okay.
That's
Well,
one of the things. It's one of the things about podcasting. Make sure that you know your partner is recording.
yes, that is a key component. We've had a couple recording issues in the history of the show, and I am now recording. And I finally get to say my line where others can hear it. We've got waveform.
He says this all the time. He thinks it's going to catch on, and it's not.
It
It's really
is. It
not.
totally is. It totally is. So I'd like to welcome my Criterion Correction collaborator, Ed, to the weekly build series. So this is kind of a cool crossover and sort of cross promotional too, in a way. So I'd encourage anyone who might be watching this at the moment to go check out the Criterion Correction podcast.
And it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So basically, what we're going to be working towards is this week I am really delving into the process of composing a podcast. Last night I talked about how to go about setting up hosting a website, getting a domain, setting up all that cool stuff. Eventually, I'm going to dig into the nitty gritty details of actually setting up a podcast feed. But I wanted to actually just give a representation of what it's like to record an episode at a distance, because you and I, we have been doing this podcast for a year now, right?
Yep, we've been doing it for a year, and as you're alluding to, we are not even close to being in the same place. You are in North Carolina, and I am in Virginia. And even my conception of geography is such that I know those things are not next to each. Well, they are next to each other, but the towns are not. We are not on the border of Virginia and North Carolina, to be clear.
True, but at least we're in the same time zone. That makes things a little bit easier in terms of collaborating.
Just a bit.
Yeah, so about, I guess, a little over a year ago, we came up with the idea for this podcast. I was like, hey, let's do a podcast. And you were the person who actually figured out a focus for it, which was quite handy.
Yeah, and I figured, and this might be a tip for others as well. I wanted to do something that was rather limited in focus, something that appealed to our interests, but still allowed us enough room to exercise our creativity with. And I think no matter what endeavor you're going with in terms of podcasting, whether that be fiction or any kind of cultural thing, I think what you want your focus to be and something to at least mildly stand out in a whole universe of content is important.
Oh, yeah. I think it's important in some cases to identify a niche audience, just because there are so many podcasts out there. And when you even investigate the niche of the Criterion collection of films, we are by no means alone in podcasting about this series of movies.
Something that I did not know, and perhaps wish I had. But even given that, I don't even think it's necessarily a bad thing that someone else is doing the thing you're
Oh,
doing,
yeah.
so long as you have some kind of new thing that you can add to that thing. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. It's what you can do that is new to that thing. That was tangled, but hopefully it made sense.
Everything is a remix. Info.
Indeed.
Yeah. And I agree that I think it's actually good. We're in pretty good company with some cool podcasts out there, like Criterion Cast. And I know that they do also focus on some other elements, such as the actual, more of the behind the scenes kind of production of special features and cool stuff that we don't really have as much access to. But it is interesting that we get to be part of a conversation of a sort. So I like that.
Well, you don't have access to because you don't believe in physical media. However, I can't even talk that much because even though I have most of the DVDs that we discuss, I usually don't delve into the special features. So any credibility I had is now shot.
We're both heathens. It's okay. It's okay. So tonight, I thought that we would just talk a little bit about our backgrounds in terms of what we thought were some of the interesting things about doing a podcast, what we learned over the past year. And I'm actually screen recording this. I don't know if you knew that, Ed. So my screen is visible. Yours, of course, is not, unless you shared it through Skype, which you don't have to. So what I'm pulling up right now is a list of our scripts, well, our intro script, and it's actually pretty short, but it's something that we've kind of tailored over the past 50-ish episodes, and it's nice to have a place to sort of store your documents. So I use the Ulysses text editor, and as I scroll through, you can see that I've got basically all of the episode synopses and breakdowns for the past year, just all the little blurbs that get published alongside of it and publicized. So whenever you're starting out, it's really good to have some kind of set pieces like the intro and even a closing script so that you can just have that down, so you don't need to think about it as much every single week. 'Cause at first I think we were kind of just freewheeling.
Absolutely, and both as you note, somebody who records a podcast, but has also been an avid consumer of podcasts. I think it's a pretty common thing for any of them, and I suppose this goes in any field of creative endeavor, for there to be some rocky moments when you're first starting out, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, and it's certainly normal. And I think as you move forward, you'll find whatever rhythm it is that you have, if you're doing it on your own or if you're doing it with a co-host. But yes, I think you will eventually find that you'll settle down into maybe not distinct segments, but at least some form of routine, even if that routine is to not have a routine.
Yeah, you get into the rhythm of it. I think that's a good way of describing it, because we've sort of found our way into, I guess, what's pretty comfortable at the moment. That generally it's kind of straightforward how we're going to approach an episode each week, what we're going to be talking about, looking for, the lame jokes that we'll inevitably make, that all of that is part of the Criterion Correction brand.
Oh goodness, we sound like marketing people.
Oh, I hope not. That's the last thing I want to sound like here. Obviously, we haven't done that good of marketing this podcast.
You use the word brand, that automatically makes you a marketing flag.
Oh, I guess it does. It makes me kind of like a marketing-esque thing. It's like a buzz term to throw out there.
Next, we'll be talking about synergy.
Synergy? No, I've never used that word. But yeah, so the idea tonight is also to take what we were saying and transform it into a podcast episode. So this is kind of the raw take. This is the material that rarely actually gets listened to by the audience, and the goal for me is that by the end of the week is I'm actually going to edit this little thing into a podcast, which will be sort of an interesting example of how something goes from a choppy raw form, in which we often have, when you work over Skype, pauses between our statements because of the very slight delay, and also just not having visual cues to work with to know when someone is actually done making their point.
Absolutely, and that can make it difficult to edit sometimes, because as I'm sure we'll go into, the two of us share editing duties, basically swapping on a week-over-week basis. And on the one hand, it's kind of like fitting together a puzzle with our different audios, but on the other hand, it's like fitting together a puzzle where sometimes some of the edges are too big, and so maybe sometimes you have to kind of mess with the puzzle more than you usually should with a puzzle, and this metaphor is quickly breaking down.
Oh, wonderful metaphor, wonderful metaphor. And that's the other thing about recording a podcast, is you get to erase all of those little verbal flubs that you make, especially filler words, mispronunciations. It is amazing what you can accomplish in editing an audio file, because unlike even video, there's not really a trace most of the time. It just blends so well together, and it's fantastic, because I can make even this rambling whatever this is eventually sound like a very polished, put together thing, which I'm hoping that'll actually work out.
Also, you can eliminate breathing. Like we're still breathing, but I never notice like other than with more like explicitly interview type podcasts, you don't hear people with the intake of breaths at the beginning of sentences like that. And that's something that unless it feels right for the rhythm of a podcast, something I usually take out when editing because it seems distracting, or at least it would be distracting to me as a listener.
Yeah, and I think one of the balances is is the balance between achieving perfection and being able to edit in a timely fashion. Because I know when I first began editing, it would take me probably about 5 hours to go through a 50-minute episode that we had done.
You're alone in that. It never took me that long. My rule of thumb is usually about 2 to 3 minutes for every minute of audio. So if it's a half hour file, I would expect to take an hour to an hour and a half of editing it into a podcast. So for example, I'm able to I usually watch MST3K episodes while I'm editing because they're
What?
things that I've seen. I don't tell me you don't do it too.
No, I honestly, I do not. I can't actually have anything going on in the background while I'm editing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd go crazy if I didn't. I mean, it
Wow.
has to be ones I've seen like a lot. So it's not really that I say watching. I'm not really watching. It's
Yeah.
just there as background noise, so that there's something going on.
I feel like
But
I'm learning something now.
I mean, my attention is still on what I'm editing, but at least I have something else going on in the background to occupy my mind as well.
Right.
That may not. It makes it sound like I'm not paying attention, but really I am. It's a way for me to concentrate on what I'm doing.
No, I get it. I understand it, especially from working with students who are often like in a writing process. Do you need music to write? And I think in an editing process, do you need music to edit? And for me, I guess it's just the audio stream. I guess I've never tried it, so maybe I'll have to give it a shot next time. But we'll see.
I mean, what I did, it's not the, basically in terms of audio mixing, and not that I do very much mixing with this, but basically the TV will be on at like very audible but not loud volume, and the audio that I'm editing on my laptop will be at a loud volume. So I don't know. Again, don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how
No.
my work process has evolved.
And you listen to it in regular speed, right? At regular speed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I do.
I listen to the Chipmunks version of our podcast, which I can't demonstrate at the moment, but I just love the Chipmunks version. I really think that for a Christmas episode next year, we should do one that is a chipmunk version of the Criterion Correction.
That could be interesting as an experiment.
There's a certain joy in hearing both of our voices because I use Adobe Audition to speed it up to double time, and it just shifts it into the stereotypical fast, high pitched speaking tones, and I love it. And sometimes I just wish it was the audio file. Sometimes it sounds so much more cheerful and peppy, but it also helps me get through it a little bit faster.
See, you may have told me that before and I forgot it, but I couldn't do it like that because I feel if I were listening to it at double time, not that I usually when I'm doing trims to audio, it will either be at the start or end of statements or passages. So it's not that I'm often doing mid passage editing, but if I do need to do it, if like one of us slips and cusses, or if there's like a digression that doesn't need to be there, I would fear that I would miss that if I was listening to it at that speed.
Only occasionally. That it's actually still pretty audible, able. Flipping words. This will be something I can edit later. It is still pretty easy to pick up when something has gone awry in the podcast. I found at least that I can tell if there's been a slip up or if if something's been repeated in a phrase. But
Yeah. So what's your, I think we might have, even aside from the functional differences, I think we have slightly different approaches to like basically what we choose to cut and what we don't. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but how do you approach that?
well, it really depends. In the beginning, I was much more detail oriented, I think, and it took me so long because I would consider, well, what if I switch this segment around? What if I change the order of something? Or what if I make sure that I get rid of every single filler word that we have in the podcast? And that goes down to such a granular detail that it's pretty hard to sustain. Now, essentially, I make sure I take out our cuts where we ramble and end up saying, okay, that's not going to work. We should just scrap that. Or I cut out things that when we have false starts on phrases. And occasionally, if there's something that just kind of fell flat, I'll just take out a larger segment. But by and large, I'm just going through to make sure that it's relatively polished and that we don't have any glaring flaws. But I'm not looking to make substantive changes in the edits.
See, I think I'm a little bit more detail oriented than you, but not like obsessively so. So I do, and I'm sure I miss them if you go back to listen to my edits, but I do tend to take out the beginning filler words. One thing I've noticed, at least with my software, is you can almost always, like, if you look at the waveform, you can end up
Waveform.
seeing, like, you can see a bump before you go into a more sustained waveform, and almost always those little bumps are either filler words or breaths or something like that. So I've just developed a feel for just taking that out instantly, and I'm almost never been wrong about them being that. And in terms of more broader edits, I guess I'm the same in that if a bit or if a discussion we're going down either really doesn't work or was more misguided than I thought it was in the moment, I'll take it out. I wouldn't say I do it super frequently, but I would say if we record 30 minutes of audio, I would say 25 minutes would be in the uh, actual edited version. And I don't know what that ratio is like for you, but I think that takes out failed bits, places where we know where places where we both know we messed up, filler words, things like that.
Failed bits. We never have failed bits. We just record and everything is perfect. That's the illusion, isn't it?
I think you made a mistake in trying to preserve that illusion by having us do this to begin with.
Oh, I know. This is breaking all of those rules. So I'd like to just ask you, what equipment, or not equipment, what programs do you use to record and edit?
So I record my audio on Audacity, which is all the software I use is free. So I record it on Audacity. I export it. There's a function export to audio, I believe, that will export it as I believe an MP4 file, or no, I'm sorry, a WAV file.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the editing process, I found one that's called WavePad, which I'm sure there's many others out there that are wonderful, and this is just one of many. But for me, it was very intuitive in terms of being able to grab audio, move audio, find where to cut audio, and then save it as, again, a WAV file for you to upload.
Okay, yeah. So and that works out then. And so it's pretty easy to use WavePad.
Yeah, yes, I think both are very easy to use, and bear in mind, I mean, I know you know this, but I had never done any audio recording or audio editing before, except like on my phone or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's not like I was coming to this with a lot of experience. It's really been a lot of trial and error. But
Well,
again, yeah.
do you feel like you've built a skill set in the past year then?
I do. I wouldn't pass myself off as a master editor or anything like that. Far from
Yeah.
it. There are professionals who could do twice, like not even twice, like pick a high number, that number times the job that I can do. But I think I have learned the skill set that, not that I think will be necessarily professionally marketable, but definitely wouldn't hurt me if, and there could be instances where I could end up using it on the job where that would be useful to me. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely a skill set that's been useful to me, even if it's not directly, tangibly, or professionally useful to me in the future.
Yeah. Um, and I feel the same that I think before we started this, I had done a podcast for a class at one point that was maybe like 4 minutes long and ripped music from Battlestar Galactica for the background, which is very much a no-no if you're putting together and that's pretty much common sense. But since then, it really has been interesting to delve into this process, even in terms of things like the leveling of audio. And so that's something that I tend to take on just so that we have some consistency. But figuring out how to, for example, match our volumes, it used to be at the beginning very much a matter of trial and error. And so I would have to go through and manually adjust. Okay, do we sound the same volume? Are we at the same volume? Am I hearing things? Do the headphones make a difference? And then I discovered in the program I use, Adobe Audition, which is not free, but I have to subscribe to the Creative Cloud for other reasons, so might as well make use of it. That there's an auto match loudness setting. There are a lot of different effects that you can go in and remove noise, which I'm hoping is going to actually work a miracle here, because you can very clearly hear my laptop fan just straining under the burden of streaming and recording, and yeah.
No, I just assumed that was a drone coming to get you.
I know. It's that CIA program. It's out to get us. But yes,
Well, out to get you.
out to get me. Yes, out to get me. But as my collaborator Ed stated, we each record our own audio separately, which has some nice benefits, because I know there's ways around it, but in a studio setting, I'm not sure how you isolate the tracks if you're in the same room. I'm sure there must be some technology to do that, but what's really great is that even if we speak over each other, because we have separate audio tracks, we can separate that out. Like, we can move it so we're not overlapping if it prevents the audience from being able to coherently tell what's going on. And I've used that quite a few times just to like clear up when we just end up laughing at something or talking at all at once.
Well, and also, I think when we first started, I remember that you recorded the Skype call that we used, and not that
Yes.
not that I think you'd really ever plan to use that to edit off
Yes.
of, but kind of as a guiding track to use.
And
And
as a fail safe, which for that one
yeah,
movie, for the one Chaplin movie,
the Gold Rush.
yeah, I would have used it then, but alas.
But and again, not that you ever planned to use it for the actual audio for the podcast, but even if you had, I would, and because it would certainly be easier. It would save us from having to edit it. But I'm still glad that we don't do that, because if you listen to, again, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Most of them are either in the same room or have a setup like we do where they record audio separately. And the few where you can tell somebody is calling in on Skype, the audio quality is just much worse. It's not that it's not even that it's unlistenable.
Yeah.
Most of it's perfectly listenable, but you can tell it's less professional because or that it is being done at a distance. Whereas if we didn't tell you, you wouldn't be able to know.
And I feel bad, but at least in the early episodes, there's Movie Time with the Mads. Have you checked out that podcast yet?
I have, and I think I know where you're going, so I'll let you finish up there.
Yeah, so I mean, I love it. I love the people who do it, and it's not like it's a deal breaker, but at least in episodes I've listened to, one person is very clearly calling in, and the audio quality is just so different. And it's again, you get used to it. I mean, clearly it doesn't prevent me from listening to it and enjoying it, but at the same time, that I feel like anything you can do to avoid that break in immersion is good if you can swing it. But obviously there's benefits to not having to work with two separate audio files. And again, I do have the call recorder screen pulled up. It is something that's useful if you want to just ensure that you have an audio track if something just goes horribly wrong. But as a whole, we've stopped using it. That we can basically just edit these together, and it's very easy. It's very cool how visual that audio editing is in terms of working with the waveform. Because you really can just I can like figure out where our episodes begin now as a result just by looking at the waveform. Like, okay, here's our intro, I am talking, then you're giving your name, then we're going through the whole spiel, and it's perfect.
Exactly, and I think that this again is where the kind of puzzle piece metaphor comes into place, because often what I'll do at this point is I'll put together like maybe 2 minutes of audio, which I can just piece together from seeing the peaks and valleys of the waveform, and then just listen to 2 minutes straight, and then from there do the editing of the different false starts, breaths, etc. And is it like a lot? Is it a lot of time saved? I'm not sure, but it provides a better experience for me as the person editing it, rather than just doing it one sliver. I mean, I guess I'm still doing it one sliver at a time, but I'm putting a bunch of slivers together and then listening and then making my tweaks and then moving on. I don't know if that's what you do or not, but it's what I personally found helpful.
Maybe I'm actually be recording my editing process soon, so you can eventually watch that and tell me if I'm just doing it all wrong or if I'm, not following the ed approved method of podcast editing.
Well, I don't think my way is necessarily inherently right. I mean, you're always going to be wrong. There's no question of that, but it doesn't mean I'm necessarily right.
Yeah, and I think that it's. I don't even know what I was gonna say. This happens a lot in our episodes too. Just train of thought just goes out the window.
And that's where it always helps to have a co-host that can make some kind of clean start that you can then edit out the trail off in the editing process. Something like, so, Dr. Z, ...
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I think, a pretty good representation of what our process is like. I also think that working with separate audio files is nice just because then you do have the ability to tailor, customize them. That, for example, I don't know if you knew this, but I have specific equalizer, like EQ forms that I apply to each of our tracks individually. So that, like, we don't have the exact same settings across them, but anyway, it's, geeky stuff.
I did not really consciously know that, but I knew it sounded good for a reason, and I trust you knew the reason.
Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. Anything else? I guess a couple of things in terms of a backlog. A backlog is really nice. We are actually in the process of building our backlog, but it also means that, say you're trying to make timely references in a certain sense, like for us trying to connect to movies that are upcoming or something of that sort. It means we really need to take some time to look at the calendar and figure out, when is this episode going to release? Can I make that statement? Am I going to be wrong on that? Is that movie really not going to be releasing in sync with the movie we're talking about this week? So a backlog is great, but again, it kind of takes away from the timeliness of it.
Also, do we want to talk for a second about, like, literally what we record on?
Oh, like computer-wise?
Well, microphone-wise.
Oh, microphone. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I kind of talked about this last night in a different episode. But yeah, what microphone equipment do you use, Ed?
I use a Blue Snowball microphone, and I believe both the microphone and what I'm about to say next were things that you told me about. But there's also a thing called the pop screen that you can put so the microphone hooks up via the USB drive to my laptop, and then the pop screen has an attachment that clamps to my desk, and then you can adjust the screen to be in front of the microphone and basically speak into the pop screen. And you'll have to remind, I know there's a good reason that we do that, but you're going to have to remind me what that reason is, or remind the listeners.
Okay, it's because, and forgive me, if you say p and you don't have a pop filter, a pop, you're going to hear a pop in your microphone instead of having nice soft pop like P noises and like C. So like hard consonants, essentially. It prevents them from being jarring and annoying, and I just moved my pop filter to hopefully provide a demonstration of the differences there.
Okay, I was wondering why you were saying pop so frequently. I guess that now makes sense.
Exactly. And I guess the last thing that I kind of would like to say is just that if you even have the slightest desire to start a podcast, go for it. I think there's a real joy in intrinsic motivation and doing things that you enjoy. And for example, if you're working on a podcast with a friend who does not live in a close geographic area, it's quite nice to actually have a reason to talk on a regular basis, sort of setting up like a weekly appointment to get together, chat, and it's been really a cool experience over the past year.
Indeed it has. Plus I've gotten to expand my co-host's palate more, / torture him on several occasions, and there's some fun to be had there as well.
Hey, I'm still arguing Seventh Seal was an upper of a movie. I walked away feeling happy after that movie. But anyway, I guess that basically covers most of the bases. So the goal now is I'm going to take this audio file. This is already being streamed, so if you're watching it, you get the raw version of this episode. But for the final project report that I'm going to be working on, I'm going to edit this into an actual podcast, and you'll get to see the edited you get to hear the edited version of it.
I don't know, maybe they have, was it synesthesia, where you get to see colors, man?
Yeah. I'll see how many colors I can fit into the editing.
Damn it, see colors actually works. Dang it. Hear colors, man.
Oh.
See, this is why editing exists.
Exactly, hear colors. This is why editing exists. So, anything else you'd like to add before we pack up for the night?
Just to reiterate what you said, since starting this a year ago, I mean, Dr. Z have known each other for longer than I like to admit sometimes, and we've always been, well, since we met, we've always been close, but this does give us a tangible reason to talk to each other, and sometimes even good friends need that, and I've had a great time. I look forward to continuing this for a while and continuing learning about this wonderful, weird, sometimes intimidating, but always illuminating world of podcasting.
Yes, next goal, episode 100.
Right. What will I make you suffer? I should get to pick episode 100 since you got episode 50.
I guess that's fair, although then I guess I get to claim 75 since you had 25.
That's a fair trade.
Yeah. But as a whole, I guess just one final shout out that if you are looking for a podcast to listen to, you should totally check out Radiolab in This American Life.
And if you like film podcasts, you should listen to Film Spotting and The Next Picture Show. And also, you must remember this. Karina Longworth is amazing. Oh, and Film Spotting SVU, that's also a really good podcast. All right. And Kermode and Mayo's Film Review Show. And I don't know, I don't think there's any other film podcasts that are any good, do you?
I'm not as familiar with those, and sorry, my cat's in the background, so you may be hearing my cat going crazy at the moment. But yeah, so those are some other podcasts you should check out. And for YouTube, check out Movies with Mikey, by all means. It is fantastic. I don't even have to say anything more than that. Just check it out. Movies with Mikey.
Okay, well, while we're repping YouTube channels that aren't ours, you should check out Lindsay Ellis. She does some great long-form video essays, and also Every Frame a Painting.
Oh, she's back? Wasn't she like formerly Nostalgia Chick?
She was formerly the Nostalgia Chick, but now she she still has kind of a comedic edge to what she does, but it is a lot more analytical.
Awesome.
If you want something that's unexpectedly entertaining, she has like a 35-minute video about the Disney movie Hercules.
I know what
That
I'm gonna
sounds
do tonight then.
it sounds so very niche, but it's actually rather fascinating. She used to talk about screenplay structure and stuff like that. I recommend it.
All right, well, I'll have to check that out, and I hope our audience will too. And don't forget the Criterion Correction podcast if you're looking for a interesting niche movie podcast to follow. Um, with that, I've been Dr. Zed.
And I've been Ed.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. And I'm gonna hit stop recording.
Have you hit stop streaming?
No, I haven't, but that's part of the joy. This is behind the scenes. We are off the recording, but we are not off the recording. But I'm going to stop streaming in a couple minutes anyway, so make sure you save your files. Always save your files. If you're super paranoid, you might even want to export them into like an external hard drive. I don't do that, but save your files. And with that, I'm going to end the stream, and I will likely be back a little later on because I just realized I have to prepare our episode for launch tomorrow.
Uh,
So, yeah.
You know, for a split second, I forgot that I'd already edited it, and I was like, "You haven't started editing yet?" And it's like, "Oh wait, no, it's already been edited. You don't. Well,
Although,
you have to add part of the intro.
I
you have
know,
to do
I
5
know.
seconds of editing.
I do have to do that, but I have started at this time the night before a podcast is launched. But in any case,
Really?
yeah, I have. But I'm going to stop streaming now. So, clicking stop streaming now. See you later.